So we're talking The Golden Straitjacket, autobiography from a man from Norton, Chris Joseph. The book is on Amazon Kindle books, Audible, iTunes audiobooks as well. Chris, welcome to the studio once again. You're no stranger to the studio, of course.
I'm always here.
So about the book, it's a book you've had around for quite some time, but it's been revamped. There's been new content added, new title, new branding. What's the reason for this?
The reason was because the book needed to be brought up to date. The terminology had changed. Manic depressive psychosis is no longer known as manic depressive psychosis. It's now known as bipolar affective disorder or bipolar illness. And people need to, the symptoms are the same, the stories are the same, but the whole issue is now in the public gaze, and the book is as relevant as it ever was in helping and trying to help people who suffer from those illnesses and from physical disability as well.
So obviously living with the condition, take us back through your story.
Well, my story very simply is that I walked out of university when I was 19, when I was studying French at Liverpool University, to become a priest, a Catholic priest, and it was decided that I was a wee bit controversial by the bishop, so they sent me away to think about it for a year, and what happened was a couple of mentors were put in charge of me, a couple of priests, to see whether or not they could sort of set me different tasks to do. So I ended up at the very famous nightclub Fiesta as a bouncer, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then I ended up being sent to a monastery in the north of Scotland, which I found a little bit tougher. And especially since one of the main points was you've got to keep quiet most of the time.
That's not a trade you subscribe
Not
to.
a trade that I understand. But the final thing was to go and work in heavy industry, and I went to work in a dilapidated headwrights and iron foundry when I was 20. And after 6 months of near-death experiences, I actually went into my right arm. I fell inside the gearbox of an overhead travelling crane and was pulled between the gears. So all of that is actually in the book. And then beyond that, how I recovered, I survived the accident, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. And then after that, how I, having lost my arm, I went back to university, did my degrees, went into the advertising industry, worked for Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising in London on new business, and had my own advertising agency called Hook Advertising, which was named after the silver hook on the end of my arm. And then beyond that, the success of that advertising agency, the book contains some of the very funny things we did and how we won business. And I'll give you an example of our biggest account was a company called BYPS, which was the Barclays Phillips Shell Consortium. And it was in the days before Orange and O2 and everybody. It was a new telephone system, and I invented a logo and a name for the telephone system, which was different to the other telephone systems. And the system was actually called Telepoint, but ours was called Rabbit because you got on it and you rabbit basically. And what happened was. When we won the account, we only had 10 people working for us. But what we did was we actually set up an illusion of a much bigger advertising agency with paintings on the walls and plants and photo shoots going on and all. When we were visited by the client, and we won the account because they were after the rabbit logo, but they were trying to be a bit cleverer. And it was a day when, as I say, everything went well. The phones were ringing all the time, and basically the agency was was buzzing, and it had 40 to 50 people sitting in the agency, all working away and whatever. They were all ringers. And then at the end of the day, everything disappeared again. All the partitioning and everything went, but we won the account. So we had some real fun and games, and a lot of that's actually is in the book. I mean, having lost my arm, I tend to think things through laterally, often before I see them head on. And it's because I'm used to doing things with my other arm, my left arm. So the book's about that. It's about some of the other funny things that went on. And 10 years after I'd lost my arm, I started suffering from full-blown bipolar illness. And the mood swings that go with that, really high, sort of crazy episodes, followed by incarceration in mental institutions. And I talk about that, and I talk about what it's like to actually go through those processes. As I say, don't eat your sandwiches when you're hearing about how I lost my arm, because at the end of the day, you may not be able to keep them down.
Was that horrific experience of losing the arm a trigger for bipolar, or is it something that, had you not lost your arm, it would have come along at some point and you would have fallen to it anyway?
It was a trigger. It was a psychological trigger more than anything else, because I anticipated every year that something would happen to me on the anniversary of losing my arm. And 10 years into it, my wife, who is no longer my wife, she announced that she was pregnant exactly on the day, exactly to the time when I lost my arm. And it was our first child, and it just sent a rocket of adrenaline through my system. And the next thing you know, I was high as a kite. And nobody, next thing you know, I was sectioned and put into a psychiatric ward. And some of the horrendous stuff that goes on in relation to mental illness and the way people are treated in psychiatric wards. I experienced psychiatric wards in Paris. I experienced one in Morocco, which was horrendous. It was like very much like the Midnight Express experience. I just really want people to understand what it is actually like to go through the processes. There's a Harley Street psychiatrist who actually recommends my book to people who come in to see her. A lot of people these days say, I'm a bit bipolar. There's no such thing as being a bit bipolar. We're all a little bit high and low. I mean, especially being a Borough fan, it's very difficult not to be high and low.
More lows than highs at the moment.
But at the end of the day, when you get into the level of being a psychiatric patient and having then to live with the stigma and everything that's around it, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. So if anybody's out there saying, I think I'm a bit bipolar and I'll go and see the doctor, well, you're probably not bipolar, not in the proper sense of the word. And perhaps you should think about the issue of labelling yourself as such. But I decided, I became chair of the national charity, the bipolar organisation. And when Spike Milligan was the patron of it, the Goon, and people didn't understand mental illness. Now people are talking about it. It's wonderful that they're talking about it, but I want them to do more than talk about it. I want them to do things like actually put money. I want the government to put some money into mental illness. It's not just physical illness that needs looking at. It's everything that needs looking at, and I want people to realise that, as I say, that it's mental illness is a flaw in your health, and physical illness. It's a flaw in your health, and it's not a flaw in your character.
How much of it is because we see problems with physical ill health, yet we don't necessarily see the problems associated with mental health?
Absolutely right. I mean, people don't understand the stigma of actually being labelled with a or libelled, as I used to say, with a mental illness. But as you say, it's invisible, and the suffering is usually invisible. But those of us who, and there are a lot of people now speaking about it. And those of us who can need to do it and need to be out there telling people what it's like and trying to get people to empathise, really in a situation where possibly it is so difficult to empathise unless you've been through it.
So recurrently, and in an awareness period of time, What do you make of these awareness weeks, awareness months, for things like bipolar? Is it a good thing, or are we paying lip service?
I think, to be honest, it's we need awareness all the time. We don't need awareness just once a year or World Mental Health Day, and it's good that these things happen and are flagged up, but the sufferers suffer from it all the time, and as I say, it's up to the government to put money in where it's needed. And there's a little more to dealing with people with mental illnesses than there is to, I don't know, repainting their wards just for the sake of it. There's more research needed. Police need to be trained properly as to how they deal with people who are suffering from mental illnesses, because, and that's sort of the stuff that's in my book, is how I was treated by different authorities, what it was like to be sectioned. I mean, one of the dumbest things, I don't know whether they still do it, because I've been in remission for quite a few years now, but one of the dumbest things that you'll ever see, and I mentioned this in the book, is actually when somebody's sectioned, the patient, they give them the section from the Mental Health Act which says that they should be sectioned to read. Now, they're supposed to be de facto ill and mentally ill. How on earth are they supposed to understand a section from the Mental Health Act? So I don't know whether that still happens these days, as I say, but it used to always strike me as being incredibly stupid.
Okay, this is very much your personal story. It was originally called Manecdotes, wasn't it? But you've now added new content to it, things like the relationship you have now, enjoying your involvement with setting up the Middlesbrough Supporters Forum, but also in there, and I'd like to spend some time on this, Chapter 64, something called Bupkiss. What's it called?
It's called Much Ado About Bupkiss.
So first and foremost, what is Bupkiss?
Bupkiss is, if you listen to movies, every now and again you'll have somebody saying, I got Bupkiss out of this, and it's literally nothing. You get absolutely nothing out of it, and Bupkiss is a Yiddish word, it's a Jewish word, and I just put it in there because I quite like the sound of it.
It's like, can I describe it as a battle? You fight with the combined authority, with the mayor of the Tees Valley over the trademark of Teesside Airport. Let's have a listen. It is in audiobooks form as well, so let's have a quick listen to the intro for Chapter 64.
Chapter 64. Much Ado About Bupkiss. In 2015, I was campaigning with some friends to have our local area known by its popular name, Teesside, and not as the politicians wanted to describe it, Tees Valley. They had foolishly walked away from our much-loved Teesside identity, and in 2004...
So, I mean, obviously, you're a big supporter of Teesside, the area, its identity. Can you set the scene for us, though? What inspired you to get involved in this identity of Teesside?
Whenever people wonder, they ask the question, where do you come from? We all kind of skate around the issue. We go... Oh, well, Middlesbrough, well, near Newcastle. I mean, our identity has changed over so many years, over so many recent years. We were Teesside, sometimes you're Durham, sometimes you're Cleveland. We don't know where we are, and the politicians, they deliberately lent towards this Tees Valley identity that they've got. Well, we're not a valley. And we already had a solid identity with the words Teesside, which people actually enjoyed, but apparently there were a few people in Darlington who weren't happy with the idea of the concept of being Teessiders. And I'll tell you what, when I go and sit at Middlesbrough and listen to the crowd, I've never ever heard the crowd shout Tees Valleyers, and I hope I never will. I mean, it's Teessiders is what we are. And when you actually identify that, when you say to people, we come from Teesside, people know where we come from. And they've over the years. And so I'm a great believer in strong brands. I mean, that's what I do as an advertising man. So
you took on the battle for Teesside, the identity of Teesside, but you also trademarked Teesside Airport. What's the story behind that?
Well, while I was doing it, while I was actually doing the campaign, or while we were campaigning for the Teesside identity, I deal with trademark all the time.
That's effectively your business.
Dealing with advertising identities, brands, logos, campaigns, whatever they happen to be. And I just happened to check on whether or not Teesside Airport had ever been registered. And I was trying to see whether or not I could persuade the then owners, Peel Airports, to try and to change the name back to Teesside, because I believe and still believe that they virtually made it totally anonymous by doing what they did with it and changing it to the Durham Tees Valley Airport, which was a mouthful of goodness knows what and compromise. It was known as Teesside Airport. It was successful as Teesside Airport. It was on signs all around the world as Teesside Airport. And anyway, when I actually checked, it hadn't been registered.
And when was this?
This was back in 2015.
Right.
Late 2015. A series of companies, Teesside Airport Limited, Teesside International Airport Limited, which I found again. Nobody had them. So I created a raft of intellectual properties, which I describe as an intellectual property suite, including a logo, a very strong logo, a very powerful logo. What I did was, I put together a presentation.
When is what you've done standard in terms of the branding, the trademark, the marketing world? Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's what we do. We look for opportunities. If we've got a brilliant marketing idea, we'll take it to somebody and say, look, why don't you think about doing this? And it just struck me as being so obvious that it needed to be done. And I did see and recognise the trademark, the change in the name. It coincides with the downfall of the airport. I mean, Durham Tees Valley Airport, as I say, meant nothing to anybody. Anyway, so I went ahead and registered it, and then the day that we pitched to Peel Airports, I took the ideas through with the bones of an advertising campaign, and said, "This is what you should do." Anyway, as it turned out, there was no appetite for change, and that was really because there was nobody saw any future for the airport.
So this was in 2015?
No, the actual pitch took place in 2016, right, but the marks were registered.
So marks were registered 2015, the pitch was in 2016. Try and, if we can, bring it forward a little bit, because the battle that's been made public is with Ben Houchen, or has been with Ben Houchen, and the Combined Authority. Or was this before the Combined Authority came into existence?
Combined Authority came into existence in April 2016. We pitched to Peel in June of that year, but the Combined Authority had no intention or whatever at that time of buying any airport, we pitched to Peel. We got no real response from them. So what happened was I went the following year. Well, then Ben Houchen turns up on the scene.
And when did this come about again? Was it 2017? Yeah,
2017. The mayor of the Tees Valley was elected, and that was Ben Houchen, the Conservative mayor.
So you'd registered and discovered these trademarks you pitched to Peel in 2016, and Ben Houchen comes on the scene in 2017.
Yeah, he came on the scene in May 2017. As soon as he got on, and the main platform of what he was arguing was he wanted to buy back Teesside Airport and give it to the public, and good for him. That was so. I was quite pleased, and I wrote to him and congratulated him on his appointment as mayor, and said, that I own the marks. And
so, what was the response you got?
I got back an email basically saying that he considered what I'd done to be very enterprising, but he said that he was busy dealing with things, and he couldn't really get together for the time being because it was a bit early to see how he could go about dealing with this airport. So So we just sat there. But then he started using it over and over and over again.
Sorry, he was using what over and over
Using
again?
the trademark, using the name Teesside Airport,
Okay.
which was a registered mark, and using it in official correspondence, using it everywhere he went. He was still referring to it as Teesside Airport.
And for those of us who don't understand how trademarks work, what was the problem with that?
The problem with it was that it was a registered mark, and what we sought from him and then the combined authority was a license. We offered them the idea of licensing it, and we asked them to stop using it until they actually had a license, because it was effectively our mark.
So technically it's your property, yeah?
Technically, it was our property, yeah.
So it would be like if I suddenly started doing a Coca-Cola series or a McDonald's series without any permissions, then we'd find ourselves in trouble under a similar sort of...
Exactly right. And what happened was the combined authority, to give them their due, at that stage stopped referring it as to it as Teesside Airport. They took down all the Teesside Airport references off their website. Now, the mayor carried on doing whatever he was doing. So we actually wrote them. Then the combined authority said to us, how much would you want for this? And that was back in 2017. And we wrote back to them and said we were looking for £250,000 because it's not the name. It's the name of a international airport we're talking about.
It's a lot of money.
Not in advertising terms.
And just to be clear, this wasn't for them to use it. This was for them to own it.
To own it, to own all the properties associated with it, to own the companies, to own everything.
How much was the rabbit deal?
The rabbit deal was £10 million. If you Orange, the logo for Orange, which was the orange square with the word orange in it, we're looking at about £4 million is what was paid to design that. And basically, it was, to be honest, £250,000. As it turned out later on, was not a lot of money to ask in the airport deal. It was peanuts. It was bupkis.
But I suppose the difference is 250,000 from combined authority is money that's out of the public pocket, the public purse kind of thing.
That has nothing to do with me. If they go and buy a house,
commercial arrangements,
they'd expect to pay for it. They wouldn't walk through the door and say, "I'm sorry, we haven't got much money because we're the public purse." They would pay the market price.
And I don't want to get too far ahead of the story, but effectively this is what Ben Houchin was coming back saying. I'm not going to let this guy take this money out of the pockets of Teesside or Tees Valley or the local people. Did he not have a valid argument?
No, he didn't. I mean, at the end of the day, it was just a commercial deal, and it was always meant to be a commercial deal until it suddenly blew out of all proportions and went ridiculously public. And that was due to we registered the marks again in 2 other categories in the trademark registry, and then following that, in December, before the deal had gone through to buy the airport, the combined authority applied to register Teesside International Airport in the trademark registry.
And is that a problem? I mean, because that wasn't registered, was it?
No, but it wasn't. It would have been a problem for them because we own Teesside Airport, and there would have been a conflict in terms of the registry wouldn't have allowed it because ours were in there.
Yeah, because you're just going to have to excuse my knowledge of this. So if you got Teesside Airport as a registered mark to try and register Teesside International Airport or Teesside Airport Services kind of thing, it's too similar. There's a conflict.
It's too similar. So, but the interesting thing as well as the public should be aware of is that they applied to register the name Teesside International Airport before Ben Houchin conducted his famous poll on what the public wanted to call it.
I thought he did the poll and the poll came with the answer.
No, the poll came after they'd applied to register it.
Really?
Yes. And then so he applied after that date, and the other interesting thing is they applied in all sorts of different categories and services, including property development and housing developments and stuff like that. So that's an interesting one.
Okay, so Just getting back to the story, so they asked you how much you wanted, and you told them 250,000.
Well, they wrote back to us and said they wouldn't be. They didn't think they would ever be interested in it. At that price.
What happened then?
And we just said, well, in that case, can you please stop, or we'll double the price every 6 months
if you keep using the trademark.
And as I say, the combined authority, to give them their due, took it off their own websites, but the mayor kept using it. And then what happened was, which, to be honest, it was a bittersweet thing with the mayor using it, because the more he did it and the more he said it, the more everybody was convinced about it, which was good news. Could have been potentially good news as far as we were concerned. And then the deal went through. The combined authority gave the go-ahead for the deal to go through, for the airport deal to go through, that was ratified in a meeting in January 2019, and then by a huge meeting that took place in January, very publicly, and the mayor got his deal through. But we were then invited. I was then invited to come into the combined authority and actually say where I stood. So I actually said, right, the price is. I fixed the price in the meeting that I had. That was in February. It was February the 8th. 250,000. That was it for the whole deal. And I confirmed to them at that time we weren't doubling prices or doing anything like that. We'd only done it to them to try and make them realise that they just couldn't use it. I met with Julie Gillespie, who's the chief executive of the combined authority, and I met with their legal representative for the combined authority. And very shortly after that, I never met with the mayor. I did meet the mayor on one occasion, but only briefly to shake his hand. That was when the deal went through. When he got the deal ratified by the combined authority, I actually shook his hand and congratulated for the airport. Then after that we waited, and an offer came in of £20,000, which was clearly less than 10% of what we were actually asking for. Intellectual properties are usually worth quite a lot more than, I didn't, because you're talking about a serious, it would have been treating what I do for a living as not worth very much if I hadn't. If I'd accepted that, then why am I in business? I mean, there may be some agencies that would have taken it on. We agreed a deadline with their lawyers about when we were going to answer, and that was agreed. But before we could send our letter, Ben Houchin issued a statement on his Facebook site, which called me an opportunist. It revealed where I lived. He called me a profiteering opportunist who was holding the people of Teesside to ransom. He talked about the £250,000 roll-up price, in full knowledge that was 2 months earlier. I had a meeting with the combined authority where I'd made it quite clear, and that in front of witnesses, that it was the price was fixed at that £250,000.
Okay, I've got a statement here, dated 18th of April 2019. First line is, the people of Tees Valley will not be held to ransom by a profiteering opportunist, one way or another. We will change our airport's name back to Teesside International. That is unquote. Then it does say here further down on his statement, Mr. Joseph has tried to sell the rights to Teesside Airport for an extortionate fee of £250,000 with a condition that he will double the price every 6 months until I cave in. So that was the 18th of April. When did you meet the combined authority and confirm the price wasn't doubling?
8th of February. The 8th of February, 2 months prior to that.
So why did Ben Houchin on the 18th of April state that was still the case?
Well, I don't believe he didn't know, because following that meeting, I was in the corridor when Ben Houchen met with Julie. He must have known. He was in the building that day, and he knew this meeting was going on. So he knew 2 months prior that we were seeking what we were seeking, and he knew full well there was no rolling condition on it. So he distorted the facts, and he did it in correspondence to people, which I also have, and he turned it into chaos, basically.
Now, he describes you as a profiteering opportunist in that statement.
Well, no, as some people who understood what I'd done were basically saying, well, good on you. I wish I'd thought of that. And other people were turning around and saying, yes, profiteering opportunist, a.k.a. businessman. Because, I mean, Ben Houchen's a conservative, and I presume he believes in free enterprise. And let's be honest, when I wrote to him originally, he did write back and say how enterprising I'd been. You know, so I mean, I was amazed at what he came out with.
I'm sure some people would think, you know, are you not 250 grand for a name?
Yeah, and it should have been a deal that was done behind the scenes. There was no reason for it not to be. I mean, they didn't make everything known regarding the Peel Airport deal until afterwards. You know, and we're talking about the price we were looking for represented 0.31% of the overall airport deal. I mean, they bought the airport for around £80 million. For all that people may well have thought Teesside Airport is obviously the right thing to call it, we own the intellectual properties, we own the companies, and we own the marks. And we'd taken the trouble to safeguard them. And in the grand scheme of advertising, that is not worth that. It was not huge amounts.
So there's just two ways of looking at it. There's this is a commercial deal. I'm a businessman. I'm a branding agent. This is my business. Yeah. And then the other side is there's this profiteering opportunist trying to extort money out of the public purse. Quite clearly, you approach this as a commercial deal, a commercial business deal. Now, of course, as well, there was massive fallout from the statement, wasn't there? What happened?
Well, for me personally, everywhere I went, everybody was talking about it. And there was either the people saying to me, you've done well, this is a good idea, well done you. Or there were people I didn't know who were screaming and shouting at me. Facebook went mad, and social media went mad, and basically the people started threatening me on Facebook, and there were people threatening to stab me.
And in this day and age, when people threaten to stab you in a culture of knife crime, you do take it seriously.
It had affected all the people I love around me, and it scared everybody. It scared the hell out of me. What happened to me, the reason I've included it in my book is because it nearly made me ill. It very nearly triggered my bipolar illness. What happened was, the more when I went into pubs, I'd get people who I didn't know, who pointed out to people I didn't know, who would come and shout at me. So there was a media sort of maelstrom that went on around it, and I was being depicted as some sort of terrible man who'd done something absolutely rotten. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't. You know, we owned it long before anybody else did, and we had the foresight to do what we did. But, I mean, somebody said to me the other day, well, you know, you had taken a punt on it, and I did. I spent money to register it. And I'd employed trademark lawyers to look after it, which is what we do. So, there was, but to me, what happened to me personally was that I couldn't sleep. My head started to throb. I was dealing consciously with, every day I was thinking through strategies of how I was going to deal with it. The legal people were onto me. We were looking at permutations. We were looking at all sorts of things. And what we did was I got into such a state that, as I say, I couldn't sleep. Sleep is one of the panaceas to what I actually suffer from, a bipolar illness. And they knew I suffered from bipolar illness. There were people had told them prior to any discussions going on that I suffered from bipolar illness. Even the mayor admits in one of his letters he knew about my bipolar illness. Whether it was a conscious attempt to make me ill, I don't really know. But what they did, we went back to them. We went back to them through my lawyers, and we offered to agree a price of £25,000. They'd offered me 20. I wanted to do £25,000 of my legal costs, and I thought, I've got to walk away from this. And what happened was, they came back and offered us £2,500.
So they offered 20. You went back and said, I want to get this done, 25 grand plus the legal costs. And the response to you was to offer you £2,500.
The response was to offer £2,500. What they did was they appointed a lawyer in London. They stood down their existing lawyers and appointed a trademark attorney in London. He's a solicitor, works for one of the biggest firms in the world. Charges apparently £630 an hour, and they basically said, right, this is the offer. We're going to offer you £2,500. It came through the lawyers, and obviously there's no way I was going to accept £2,500.
Wasn't it worth it just to get rid of the whole situation?
No, because I wouldn't have been allowed to say anything about it, and I felt the whole thing was, all they were trying to do was bully me. The whole idea that the mayor was being bullied was crackers. The mayor was surrounded by all the money he needed to do whatever he wanted to do. But basically, I just felt I couldn't do a deal with them, not for £2,500. I would never have been able to say anything about it.
But I'm sure, he's not here to defend himself, and I'm positively looking after the region. Somebody to come along asking for £1 million for an investment that he wants to buy, and he's protecting the public purse. It's protecting the region. Can you not see it from that perspective? Not
really. Not when he distorted the facts and did what he did. The social media assault was horrendous. And he might argue that. Did the public genuinely believe that buying back the airport for £80 million when it was originally sold to Peel for £500,000? Is that good business? Again, this is why it's in the book about bipolar illness. It was like physical assault what took place. People don't understand that, but for somebody who has a trigger inside them that can actually make them ill, it was like a physical assault. And what happened was, I went to, I'm seen every month by a social worker who deals in psychiatric care, and they monitor my illness, which is why I've been successful in maintaining it, and it's been in remission for years. But it can come back, and what they were worried about was it was going to come back, and so I was advised to see a trauma psychologist because of what was going on, and what was going on in my head. The fact, as I say, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The fact that was everywhere it went, it was going on, and the fact it was probably. And the trauma psychologist said it's probably almost certainly going to make you ill. You will become ill if you carry on with this. So I thought about it, and I thought about, well, I'm not going to accept the £2,500 because that would literally be an insult to what I do for a living. It's like calling in a plumber who charges £60 an hour and saying, I'm only going to give you £1, mate. It doesn't value what I do. So I decided to walk away. I issued a statement saying I was relinquishing the marks and I'm relinquishing all the property, the intellectual property suite. What I meant by that, and what I still say, is I just wanted to free them up and walk away from it. So what I did was, the other thing it's important to say is for all the combined authority said they didn't want to go into long legal proceedings with me. What they did through what they did was they issued proceedings in the trademark registry that could have taken years if we'd contested them, to try and dislodge our trademarks. And the whole process, as I say, through my trademark agency, they confirmed it could have taken years and years and years and cost quite a lot of money. And the whole thing, there were people saying to me, let's, go and fight it, go and fight it, go and fight it. And it would have made me ill. The whole process would have made me ill. And that's what I actually took the advice of the trauma psychologist and relinquished the marks. And immediately after I'd relinquished them, immediately after I'd said I was going to relinquish the marks, there was correspondence from their lawyers offering £1 for me to transfer everything to them. I didn't, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to sit here and talk about it. So the companies no longer exist. The trademarks no longer exist. And Teesside International Airport trademark does exist.
He also stated afterwards everything was resolved amicably again. Is that how you see it?
No, it isn't.
Now, at the end of the book, at the end of the chapter, you point out there's technically within trademark law, there's the problem with the registration of Teesside International Airport as a trademark.
Yeah, in the Kindle book, I actually quote the actual legalese that their lawyers quoted, used it was one of their arguments to try and dislodge ours, and that is that geographically, if there's an area, you can't actually name something. You can't call it. They were saying we couldn't call it Teesside Airport because all it was an airport in a geographical area. Technically, that means that Teesside International Airport's got the same problem with it.
So somebody could come along and challenge that.
Somebody could challenge that
because it's a geographical reference. So looking at it all, I mean, from 2015 through until the present day, overall, is it something in the end that you wish you hadn't done? Or something that you wish you'd done differently?
I wouldn't have handled any aspect of it differently. I thought it was a commercial deal. That's all it was. That's all it was meant to be. And I'm sure that maybe the public needs to scrutinise more carefully what the money is all being spent on by the Combined Authority and the Mayor.
Chris, many thanks for your time. The book is called
The Golden Straitjacket. It's available on Amazon Kindle as an e-book or as an audio book, and Audible, and the way you see the orangutans on the screen. It's available as an e-book and an audio book.
Are you still dabbling in trademarks and branding, or has that stopped you?
It doesn't stop me. I'll keep going doing what I do. But as I say, I thought about very carefully. Obviously, years ago, I fought Barclays over a trademark issue, and we succeeded in the courts, and we actually set precedents, legal precedents, whereby advertising agencies and creative agencies can protect their copyright and copyright work, and they're the precedents by which everybody now holds their rights. So, but this time around, that was when I was 30, in my 30s, and I'm in my 60s now, and I want to continue to survive. So I'm going to keep doing little bits of work and keep doing little odd bits and pieces, hopefully what people get from this chapter, whatever the Mayor thinks when he hears this, the reason it's in there is because it's how it affected my mental health. In the chapter, there is the heading, "Health Before Wealth." And if you suffer from something like this, by all means, don't be exploited. Of course, never be exploited. But think carefully where you go and what you do. And if you need to withdraw from a situation that's going to wind you up and make you ill, get out.
Right, well, let's have a listen to it.
I couldn't sleep My mind was racing, my brain constantly throbbing, and I asked for and received medical help. I consulted a specialist trauma psychologist. He put things into perspective for me. He had little doubt that to continue would be certainly to destroy the years of remission and peace I have enjoyed since. I took stock of my life, my health and my happiness and that of the people I love, and put my foot firmly on the brake. I took his medical advice and within a couple of days issued a statement to the media in which I confirmed I would relinquish the Teesside Airport intellectual property suite due to the deterioration of my mental health.
Chris, many thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking about your battles. Obviously the commercial one with the Combined Authority and the Metro Mayor, but also as well your battle with bipolar illness. Really do appreciate your time.
Cheers.